I open this meeting of the Committee of the Whole Parliament to consider Stage 2 proceedings of the Prisoners Early Release Scotland Bill. For the duration of these proceedings, I am the convener of the committee. In dealing with amendments, members should have the marshalled list and the groupings of amendments. The division bell will sound and proceedings will be suspended for 5 minutes for the first division of the afternoon. The period of voting for the first division will be 45 seconds. Thereafter, I will allow a voting period of 1 minute for the first division after a debate. Members who wish to speak in the debate on any group of amendments should press the request to speak buttons or enter RTS in the chat as soon as possible after I call the group. The Parliament is required to indicate formally that it has considered and agreed to each section of the bill, so I will put a question on each section at the appropriate point. And members should now refer to the marshalled list of amendments. And we move to the first group, exclusions from 40% release point, Governor's veto. I call Amendment 1 in the name of Katie Clark, grouped with Amendments 7 and 16. Pauline McNeill to move Amendment 1 and speak to all amendments in the group.
Moving on behalf of Katie Clark, Amendments 1, 7 and 16. So Amendment 7 is the inclusion of a Governor's veto for short-term prison releases, and Amendment 16 introduces a government's veto when ministers are modifying regulations for early release in future. So Victim Support Scotland asked MSPs to ensure that the inclusion of a Governor's veto was in the bill. Without a Governor's veto, we believe there is no safety valve to prevent the release of individuals that are known to be a risk. The Governor's veto is a crucial safeguarding element, and it did prevent the release of 171 prisoners from the emergency early release during the summer who posed an immediate threat to individuals or the public. We believe that without the Governor's veto, the Prison Early Release Scotland Bill will not contain the vital aspect of risk assessment, potentially creating more victims and endangering the wider public. This had formed part of a previous early release programme, and it is an essential safeguarding mechanism to prevent those deemed unsafe being released early. We appreciate that it is not supported by the Prisoners Governance Association due to heavy workload issues. However, we do believe that it is a necessary safeguard due to the substantial change in prison policy, which will reduce the amount of time that some prisoners will spend in prison. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just like to say that I drafted and tried to submit a very similarly worded amendment that would achieve a similar or the same result to the one that Katie Clark did. Unfortunately, we missed the deadline by, I think, 4.5 minutes, which I think is testament to the rushed nature of this legislation. But nonetheless, I'm glad to see it in the marshalled list, and I'd be pleased to support it if moved.
Thank you. I call the Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me begin today's Stage 2 by thanking all members for their consideration of this bill and for the amendments tabled before us today. This bill is one of several measures I am taking to help reduce the high prison population, which will support the delivery of the important rehabilitation work within our prisons, which in turn we know can support a reduction in reoffending on release. As I stated previously in this Parliament, we have a high prison population, and when we have a high prison population, rehabilitation work is almost impossible for the SPS and partners to undertake. That does not support overall public or victim safety, a point made by Theresa Medhurst, Chief Executive of SPS, in meetings with some members of Parliament this week. Presiding Officer, turning to the amendments in this group, I understand why Katie Clark and Pauline McNeill seek to introduce a Governor's veto permanently into the release process, but this would not be an appropriate or practical approach. The bill is changing the point of release, but it is not changing any other aspect of the release process. This will remain the same for those being released at 50% and 40%. Yes.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for giving way, and this is in part a discussion that we had at stage 1. If there is not the provision for a governor's veto, how does the Cabinet Secretary see it playing out, given that the veto was used by governors on a number of occasions under the previous scheme and indeed probably prevented the return of prisoners as happened under the previous scheme? So what levels of protection does the Cabinet Secretary feel are in place to support the fact that there won't be a governor's veto, an individual who knows individual prisoners very well?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is an entirely legitimate question that Mr Whitfield raises. The distinct difference between early emergency release and the standard release process is that of time and pace. When the emergency release regulations were laid in summer, within about a month or so, the first tranche of prisoners were released. And in the context of changing the standard arrangements, the ongoing release planning processes are able to continue, and I will address that in a wee bit more detail as I proceed with my comments. Presiding Officer, introducing such a measure on a permanent basis would have a negative impact on the operation of the Scottish Prison Service, as well as police, justice, social work and other partners. This would prevent them from focusing on critical work to support a safe transition back to the community and work that supports communities and reduces reoffending. Last week, the Prison Governors Association wrote to me and to the Criminal Justice Committee to welcome the bill, a position also now supported by the Prison Officers Association. And I note that the Prison Governors in their letter say, as clearly as I could, why this bill is different from the emergency release process we took forward in the summer, which was temporary in nature. And if you bear with me, I would like to quote from the Prisoner Governors Association correspondence when it says, "It is important to state that this bill is significantly different in context to the Bail and Release from Custody Scotland Act 2023, where Part 2, Section 11, Power to Release Early Emergency Release, was utilised earlier this year, necessitating the use of a governor's veto. The context of the Early Release Bill is a decisive action to reduce remission to 40% for short-term prisoners with clear caveats, and is a change to the sentencing rules, policy and guidance. We are clear on that basis that a person should be liberated on their earliest date of liberation as per liberation processes, and that a governor's veto should not be part of any such sentencing change." Presiding Officer, current... Yes, of course.
Liam Kerr.
I'm very grateful. I hear all that the Cabinet Secretary is saying, but does the Cabinet Secretary not concede that simply bringing in a governor's veto would add an extra level of safeguard to a process that, because of the emergency process we're going through, has not been sufficiently scrutinised for safety?
Cabinet Secretary.
Actually, bringing in a governor's veto in the context of this bill will actually undermine the standard processes that support victim safety, and in particular that crucial pre-release planning which has to take place up to 12 weeks before release. The difference with this bill and the subsequent release arrangements is that there is time for releases to be planned and accommodated for. That is very different in the context of early emergency release. Presiding Officer, the current release processes already enable appropriate release planning to take place, and they do so in line with identified needs. This includes relevant information being shared with victims regarding the individual linked to their case, where they wish to receive such information. Release processes are better when everyone has time and certainty to plan. The introduction of a veto into this process would have a negative impact on release planning for both the person being released and, crucially, victims. It would also have a negative impact on other organisations' ability to set up the support needed, as all cases must be reviewed, resulting in a significant delay in releasing final release dates and information to partners, including information that can then be shared with victims. And I reaffirm today that public and victim safety remains central to decision-making within the justice system. A governor's veto power would be unworkable in practice and would divert resources away from the business-as-usual work of our justice organisations which support rehabilitation and reintegration. And I urge Parliament not to support these amendments.
Thank you. And I call on Pauline McNeill to wind up and to press or withdraw Amendment 1.
So, firstly, Presiding Officer, the Cabinet Secretary said rehabilitation work is almost impossible to undertake. And I appreciate that point, but there is a wider debate to be had about the availability of rehabilitation within prisons in the first place. So I don't really accept that as the basis of the argument. Also, I listened carefully to what the Cabinet Secretary had to say, that the difference between this bill and the bail and release bill, I wasn't fully understanding what the real difference was. We've got to bear in mind that we haven't any insight into how the veto actually worked because of the shortened Stage 1 process. So I really just have to go on what I'm hearing today and my own knowledge and what we've been furnished with in the last few days. A safeguard, as Liam Kerr said, is very, very important, and it was in 177 cases in the previous release period. But also, further on in the groups, we're still to discuss what concessions the government are prepared to make to improving the notification scheme. So if we've not to have a governor's veto, then we need to rely on a good communication scheme for victims, or indeed a release process, which we'll also discuss in groups later in the day. I don't really know what the government will say about those, but in view of my concerns, notwithstanding the points that I have acknowledged, I intend to move these amendments in Katie Clark's name.
Thank you. So the question is that Amendment 1 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed, therefore there will be a division, and as this is the first division of the stage, I will suspend for around 5 minutes to allow members to access the digital voting system.